Welcome to the 11th episode of the AfterSessions. Sir Adrian Carton De Wiart, the Unkillable Soldier.
Imagine a man who was shot in the face, head, and stomach across two world wars, yet described his combat experiences with an almost childlike glee. A man whose memoirs began, "Frankly, I enjoyed the war."
He was a walking legend, a figure so implausibly durable that he seemed to defy biology and physics both. Was he simply lucky, or was there something deeper at play in the mind of this man who stared death in the face and laughed?
Today we're dissecting the life of Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart, the unkillable British officer. We will uncover the unique psychological makeup that drove him not just to survive, but to thrive in the crucible of constant conflict.
Born in Brussels in 1880, Adrian Carton de Wiart's life. Born in Brussels in 1880, Adrian Carton de Wiart's early life was a quiet prelude to the storm. In 1891, he was sent to boarding school in England, going on to study law at Oxford. In 1899, he abandoned his studies and left for South Africa. Pretending to be 25 and signing under a pseudonym, Carton de Wiart served as a British trooper in the Second Boer War, where he was shot in the stomach and groin. He barely survived, but it was just the beginning. The Boer War was like a warm-up act for the main event, World War One.
This is where we introduce the concept of the type T personality coined by psychologist Frank Farley. Most people are wired for homeostasis, which is a self regulating process to maintain inner stability despite external changing conditions. So, if we're experiencing multiple changes in our life, our body biologically tries to provide us with inner stability. However, type T individuals crave stimulation, excitement, and risk taking. They thrive on uncertainty, novelty, and complexity, often pushing limits physically, intellectually, or emotionally. Basically, for the Vyarth, the battlefield wasn't a place of terror, but instead it was his natural habitat.
Exactly. He wasn't just tolerating danger, he actively pursued it. His brain might have actually been wired to find clarity in chaos. Arousal theory states that people are motivated to maintain an optimal level of physiological arousal, like alertness, energy, and engagement, to avoid boredom or overstimulation. In this case, he had lower natural arousal, which meant he actively sought high stimulation environments. That heightened state was where he felt most alive. The sheer unpredictability of war provided the constant high stakes feedback loop his mind craved. And this really makes you question, to what extent can a person go to seek excitement, and does the body support the mind in such a case?
World War One didn't just shape Adrian, it built his legend. At La Base, he was shot through the face, losing his left eye. He later replaced it with a glass one, often hidden behind a black patch. Then, in 1915, during the Second Battle of Ypres, his left hand was shattered. When a doctor refused to amputate, Adrian reportedly bit off two of his own fingers. Eventually, the rest of the hand was removed, and yet he returned to the front.
What we're seeing here aligns with cognitive appraisal theory of stress and trauma. Most individuals would interpret these injuries as overwhelming threats, signals to withdraw, to survive. But Adrian consistently reframed them as challenges. His injuries didn't signify limitation, they became tests of endurance. That shift in appraisal fundamentally alters emotional and behavioral response.
And that reframing likely influenced his perception of pain itself. Under normal conditions, such trauma would trigger an intense fight or flight response, often leading to shutdown or withdrawal. But in his case, attention seems to have been directed outward, toward action, toward combat. This resembles an extreme form of attentional control, where the brain deprioritizes internal distress signals in favor of immediate external demands.
And importantly, this pattern wasn't a one time reaction. He repeatedly returned to active service even after severe injuries. His identity became inseparable from the role of a soldier, not just behaviorally, but psychologically.
That connects to what we might understand as identity fusion, where an individual's sense of self becomes deeply intertwined with a group or role. In this case, soldiering wasn't something the Wiart did, it was who he was. And when identity is fused that strongly, the usual limits, fear, pain, even physical loss carry less psychological weight.
There's also an element of sensation seeking here. Some individuals have a higher threshold for stimulation and actively pursue intense experiences. In extreme environments like war, that can manifest as repeated exposure to danger, not avoidance of it.
But it leaves us with a difficult question. When someone repeatedly endures and returns to trauma, are they overcoming it or becoming dependent on the conditions that create it?
Because psychologically, adaptation to extreme environments doesn't always mean health. Sometimes it just means the person has learned to function within conditions that would break almost all others.
His story continues into World War II. At 60 years old, he led a campaign in Norway in 1940 and was briefly stationed in Northern Ireland. In April 1941, he was dispatched to form a British military mission in Yugoslavia, but his aircraft was shot down over the Mediterranean. After swimming to shore, he was captured by the Italians. Despite being in his 60s, he made numerous attempts to escape the prisoners of war camp, even avoiding recapture for 8 days after one daring breakout.
This unwavering resolve points to an extreme internal locus of control. He genuinely believed he had the power to influence his circumstances, even when imprisoned or stranded. He wasn't waiting for luck, he was actively creating it. This contrasts sharply with an external locus of control where people feel powerless in the face of fate. But at what point does belief in control stop being adaptive and start becoming defiance of reality?
He cultivated the Jungian archetype of the warrior to an almost mythic degree. The warrior represents disciplined action and courage, fighting with a purpose for a cause, rather than just for aggression, embodying strength and dedication. Adrian took on the role of the warrior with an inspiring dedication and determination. Sir Adrian Carton De Wiart epitomizes the shadow warrior archetype, a figure whose obsession with combat transcends duty. Through a career marked by daring escapes and a Victoria Cross, he displayed a fire-eating personality that found joy in the chaos of battle.
In Jungian terms, he represents the extreme edge of the warrior energy, where the fight itself becomes the supreme purpose of life, overshadowing pain, fear, and even the instinct for self preservation. After World War II, he served as Churchill's special envoy to China, traveling through dangerous regions well into his 70s. When he finally retired at 75, he famously said, I must say I thoroughly enjoyed the war. Those were the days. He died peacefully in 1963 at the age of 83 in Ireland. So the question is, was this resilience or dependence on conflict to sustain identity?
Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart was a man who was on death's doorstep not once but multiple times. He was a soldier with a biological anomaly, proving that the mind can sometimes be more stubborn than the grave.
His life challenges our understanding of trauma. He showed us that for a rare few, the thrill seekers, the greatest danger isn't the battlefield, it's the boredom of a quiet life. He wore his scars as jewelry and lived life at full volume.
He leaves us with a startling truth that perhaps resilience is more powerful than death. He was a man who lost an eye and a hand, yet never lost his vision of who he was. History counts the wounds he carried, but we remember the man who was.
Too fast for the grave to catch.